annual community prayer breakfast. Some people say 7 is a lucky number. I don't believe much in luck, but I do believe it's a good number because, for one, we got John Kasay in the room. That's going to make it a good day. And I know you came to hear him, not me, but one quick order of business before we get John to the stage. And I'm going to need your help on this a little bit. I need a few people to join me. I need Tony Sigmund. By the way, Tony, for you Thomasville people, is the new CEO of the Lexington YMCA. Welcome him to Davidson. Not that big a deal. Just kidding. I also need 2 other people to join me, and it's going to take them a while because they're 2 old retired guys. I need Gene Clump and Tommy Hodges. I know you're here because I waited outside for you. Make your way out here. Hey guys, we got a time limit on this program. While they're coming, I want to see who else is in the room for just a minute. I said this was our 7th annual community prayer breakfast. Don't be shy. If today's your first time at one of our joint YMCA prayer breakfasts, raise your hands like this. All right, first of all, thank you for being here. Go ahead and give them a round of applause. Make sure you go ahead and put this on your date for next year. It's the Friday after Labor Day, and we'll be here next year. We'll be in Lexington, so go ahead and write that down. Now, if you have been to all 7 prayer breakfasts, raise your hand. Let's give them a real big round of applause. And just so you know, you've got to come next year. You got a good streak going, okay? Now, did Tommy and Gene make it?
Yeah.
Okay. I was going to wait until we got to our 10th annual prayer breakfast to do this, but I just wasn't sure how many more times Tommy and Gene had to get out of the house this morning. But you don't have 7 community prayer breakfasts unless you have the first one. And that first one sometimes takes, well not sometimes, it always takes some vision, it takes some initiative, it takes a lot of good help. Diane, right? Where's Diane? That's really what got done. But I just want to take this moment to thank them for starting this. I think this is one of the best days of the year for the YMCA, for Thomasville and Lexington YMCA to come together, for the 2 hospitals to help us jointly sponsor this event and come together. And so it's not important enough to stand, don't do that, but just give them a round of applause for doing it. Just don't go anywhere. Now, I also know that Tommy and Gene thought that Tony and I couldn't have this thing. And I just want to tell, first of all, we can't have it because we had a great group of helpers. It really did most of the work. But just like in the game of football, sometimes it takes a team. And so Tony and I have got our parts down the pat. Tony, in case you hadn't noticed, Tony, he's a big guy. So we've got Tony snapping the ball and then providing the protection. Okay? My job is easy. Just don't drop the ball. Get it on the tee so that one of the best kickers in the history of the NFL can kick it to the uprights. Try to be a good storyteller, and they say a picture's worth 1,000 words. Let me just show you one thing. And in case you're worried that Tommy and Gene have been completely kicked out of the game, they're off the field, but we know they're on the sideline. They're our biggest cheerleaders. In all seriousness, I do appreciate Tommy and Gene starting this event because I think it has become, at least for me, it's become my highlight of the year. And I appreciate so much everybody being here today for number 7. When it comes to now introducing John Kasay, I thought about what in the world do you say about a guy like John Kasay? Everybody knows who John Kasay is. He's probably got enough stats, great stats, that I could talk about him most of the morning. I asked Gene. Gene said, that's a simple introduction. Just say, he was a great kicker. That's it. Sit down. But I want to say a little bit more than that. But I'm not going to dwell on all those stats. I did look at some of those stats. Over 82%, I believe, was the field goals attempts that he made in the NFL. He played lots of years. We were talking over here a while ago. He said it was kind of interesting at the end of his career that he was 40 years old sitting on the bench next to a 20-year-old who was 3 years older than his son. But all those years in the NFL, and I'm a great big football fan, but that's not why we're glad he's here today. He's a great family man. He's got he told me on the phone, his wife is his best friend. That's not only good and sweet, but that's kind of makes life at home a little bit better. He's got 4 amazing kids. Great family man. I watched a lot of his games over the years. He always carried himself just exemplary on the sideline as a great role model to our kids these days, which oftentimes they don't see. But that's not why we're glad he's here. Why we're glad he's here today is because he's a man of God. So what I'd like for you to do at this time is give John Kasay a great big Davidson County welcome.
Stephanie's going to appreciate how I'm going to start. And again, I know you guys have already felt like you have a workout, but I want to play a Panthers trivia game. So if everybody will stand. So here, this is the Panthers trivia game. Okay, now you can't use your phones, so put your phone down. No cheating. Okay. Who knows who the Carolina Panthers are? If you do, stay standing. How many Super Bowls have the Carolina Panthers played in? If you didn't know the answer, have a seat. What were those years? Wow. That cleared the room fast. Anybody?
94 and 2015.
2015.
You got the second one right. Wow. Wow. God, thank you. Again, so it was the 2003 season and the 2015 season. Okay? Now, again, isn't it amazing how much we knew about the Carolina Panthers when they first started, and then as things kind of go? These were some of the other questions that I had. Who's seen both of those games? Who watched the game in the 03? Who remembers, what was the Panthers' first season? 95. Good. Where did they play? Clemson. Good. What was the record that year? 95. It was 7-9. Who was the head coach? Don Capers. Where was our first game? The Atlanta Falcons. What was the score of the game? It was 23-20. Who was the quarterback that started that game? Frank Reich. Who caught the first touchdown pass, or who scored the first touchdown for the Carolina Panthers? Pete Metz was. Where was our first scrimmage? It was in Cleveland, Ohio. I use this as an example. Why is it that because I didn't sit down and study this and prepare to come here, why is it that I know all these things right off the top of my head?
You lived it.
I was there. I lived it. First victory in Carolina Panther history. 1995, New York Jets. October the 12th. Final score was 26-15. Rich Kotite was the head coach. Bubby Brister was the quarterback. Sam Mills made an interception right at the end of the game that you'll still see on some of the highlights to seal our very first win. The reason why I know these statistics and these experiences is because I lived them. I want to share a quick story with you from the Bible. In Judges chapter 2, Joshua has now just taken over from Moses. Okay, he is now leading the Israelite people after 40 years in the wilderness. And this is what it says. Judges chapter 2, verse 6 through 11. When Joshua had dismissed the people, the sons of Israel went each to his inheritance to possess the land. And the people served the Lord all the days of Joshua, and all the days of the elders who survived Joshua, who had seen all the great work of the Lord, which he had done for Israel. Then Joshua, the son of Nun, the servant of the Lord, died at the age of 110. And they buried him in the territory of his inheritance in Timnath-Heres, in the hill country of Ephraim, north of Mount Gaash. And all that generation also were gathered to their fathers, the second generation. And there arose another generation, a third generation after them, who did not know the Lord, nor the work which he had done for Israel. You see, in this situation, you have three groups of people that I'm talking about here. You have the people that serve the Lord, you have the people that saw the Lord, and then you have the people that third generation that did not know the Lord. And it's interesting in just this little example, in the 25 years of the Carolina Panthers, it's amazing how things have already started to kind of transfer. Somebody who actually was there, who actually saw, who actually experienced it, I can tick off all of these things. And it's amazing after 25 years how much life moves on, how things move on, and all of a sudden, things that we remember so clearly, we don't remember so clearly. So Israel is standing on the edge of the promised land. They're having the opportunity to go into what had been promised 40 years before. And that generation, as they were going into the wilderness, they saw the 10 plagues, right? They saw the faithfulness of God as he parted the Red Sea, as for the manna, the cloud, the fire, all of those things they all saw and experienced firsthand. And then as they were entering into the promised land, that first generation passed. So now you hear stories in that first generation to the second generation about the things that they saw and the things that they heard. But then by the third generation, you had a generation that did not know. That's what that generation is called, a generation that did not know. So either they weren't taught, they forgot, or they chose to not, right? Either they forgot, they were not taught, or they chose to not. And it's funny, that very experience reminded me of a huge test of my own faith when I was playing in Seattle. I was married, I'd been married about 3 or 4 years. My wife and I was playing for the Seahawks, and we were living in Seattle. I had signed a 3-year contract with the Seahawks, and there was no free agency. That didn't even exist in 1991. So I finished my 3rd year. Free agency had just started in the NFL, which gave us the opportunity to, when our contracts were up, to be able to move if we so chose. And so I was going into my 4th year. The Seahawks gave me a very nice offer. It was a very good offer. There were some strings attached and some things that I didn't think were probably the best. And so my wife and I had kind of decided that I would sign a 1-year contract. And so that was a really, really tough test for me personally. I had a good year my first year. I had a really bad year my 2nd year. I should have gotten cut, and I should have never played again. But the good news is I played on one of the worst teams in NFL history. So they had a whole lot bigger problems than me. So I was able to slide into my 3rd year, and actually had a decent year that year. And so I didn't know, was I going to stay on the cycle of good, bad? Or had I come out of something and it was going to start being good after that? And so I remember deciding I was going to sign this 1-year deal and take a shot. And it was scary. It may have been the end of my career. I might have been the dumbest thing I ever did. And I was walking away from a lot of money. But I walked in, I signed the 1-year deal, and I came home and I walked in the door. And I burst out crying. Because everything that I thought I had under control, everything that I thought I could do, everything that I had, God pried my fingers off all of those. And so we started the season. So the season starts right now, beginning of September. We ended up playing 2 months into the season. And it was the most amazing thing. I was having a very good year. And at the same time, the NFL announced they were going to have 2 expansion teams. One in Charlotte and one in Jacksonville. I'm from Athens, Georgia. My wife is from her little town in South Georgia, Sylvania, Georgia, which is exactly, like if you go look at it today, put a pin at Charlotte, put a pin at Jacksonville, and you draw a straight line between those two cities. My wife bisects that, where her hometown bisects that line. It's 3.5 hours either way. And we didn't know it was coming. We didn't even know that was an option. And a few months later, when the season ended, I got a phone call from a guy by the name of Bill Polian. And he called and he said, John, we want you to come and play for the Carolina Panthers. And I said, well, Bill, how bad do you want me to come play for the Carolina Panthers? And he said, send us a contract. We did. Bill Polian sent me a contract bigger and more front-end loaded than what we asked for. And it was amazing. Because, and it's not about the money. It was about, oh my gosh, I trusted God. I saw him show up. I experienced his faithfulness to me when I did not deserve it. It didn't make any sense. I don't know how I ended up here other than God's grace. Now, I have a real funny story because the owner of the team was Jerry Richardson. And he played in the NFL for a year. He was a football player. He was a very successful businessman. Most people know his story. Mr. Richardson's a very large man, 6'5", 250 pounds. And he was really excited because he spent hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars to bring this team to the Carolinas. And so on the first day of free agency, first day signings, there were 2 free agents. There was me and a guy by the name of Mike Fox. Now let me tell you about Mike Fox. Mike was 6'7", 6'8". He was about 325, 330 pounds. His head is as big as his podium. Okay. He grew up in eastern Ohio, kind of the coal mines of eastern Ohio. He went to West Virginia, and then he was a very, very high draft pick for the New York Giants. And so for this team to be able to have somebody with that type of experience, there were a lot of people that were ecstatic. And nobody was more excited than Mr. Richardson. So on the first day of free agency, they announced us to the media, right? Well, we had never met Mr. Richardson before. We met him in the back before we actually came out for that press conference. And so, Tony, if you'll stand in for Mike Fox, I want to show you how this whole thing went down. So, Mike, you got to imagine, Mike is even bigger than Tony, right? So Mr. Richardson has just dropped many hundreds of millions of dollars, right? And the first person he sees is Mike Fox, and he grabs him. He's like, yeah, this is what I'm talking about. And he did. He grabbed him just like this, and he shook him. And he's like, yeah. Now you have to understand, this is where I'm standing. Right? So Mike moves out of the way, and Mr. Richardson goes, and he looks over at Bill, and he looks over at the president, Mike McCormick, and he goes, and you can see the look all over his face. Is this a joke? Because I look like one of the interns, right? I mean, I was 24 years old, and I looked like I was about 18. And Mr. Richardson thought it was a joke. And I said, no, Mr. Richardson, I stuck my hand out. And I said, no, my name's John Kasay, I'm a kicker. And he's still trying to process in his head because he thinks he's getting clowned. And he's like, okay. And he was very kind, he was very nice, and he was very polite. But see, the reason why I use that story is Mr. Richardson was looking for doers, okay? He was looking for a doer. He wanted somebody that could be a doer. Because you only have 45 guys that suit up on Sunday, and everybody that has a uniform, they're expected to play and perform well. They're expected to be a doer. And when I went through that experience, it just clicked in my head. You know, it reminds me what James said in the book of James, chapter 1, verses 22 through 24. But prove yourselves doers of the word, and not merely hearers who delude themselves. For if anyone is a hearer of the word, and not a doer, he is like a man who looks at his natural face in a mirror. For once he has looked at himself and gone away, he has immediately forgotten what kind of person he was. Being a doer, it just kind of resonates in my head. And kind of as a little side note, when he's talking about being a doer of the word, there are kind of 3 different words for the word in the Greek. Okay, now I'm not going to show off my Greek because It's very small, okay? But the reality is their spirit, the Word of God, and this rhema is actually just a small knife, this sword. And what it does is it pokes right where you need for it to go. And God's Word, His rhema, that's why He wants us to read His Word. That's why He wants us to study His Word. Because He takes His Word and He applies it directly to our hearts. And that rhema, that's that small knife that can cut you right through the ribs. And God's Word does the same thing. So being a doer of the Word is a huge deal. It's a huge deal for all of us because it's living out what God is doing in our lives. That rhema, that kind of played out in my life of being a doer of the Word. I had an experience, this is not the most flattering experience and it's not the most flattering story, but it's such a great example of what God talks about being a doer of the Word. I had one of my best seasons in the 1996 season. I had a chance to play in the 1997 Pro Bowl. So that we would play those games out in Hawaii. So we were in Honolulu, Hawaii, my wife and me. She's about 8+ months pregnant. We snuck her on the plane. We took care of things while we were out there, but we were taking a risk by even doing that. But you don't get a chance to play in the Pro Bowl all that often. So we took a shot. We went out there. We had a fun week. It was very relaxing for my wife. It was a lot of busy things for me with playing, and we finally got to the game. And the game was, the Pro Bowl games are very boring for 3 quarters, okay? The guys don't really want to play. Nobody really wants to watch. But in the 4th quarter, the game hangs in the balance. So the winners of the game make twice as much money as the losers of the game. So a lot of the guys that go out there, they spend a whole lot of money on family, experiences, fun things, fishing charters, stuff like that. So they've amassed a pretty good bill. And so all of a sudden they realize, if I give a little bit of effort here for about 15 minutes, I can wipe away the bills that I've incurred this week, right? So all of a sudden this laughing, joking, playing around game got real intense, real fast, right? And as it worked out many times when I was playing in my career, you could see our offense got the ball, our offense drove down the field, and with 4 seconds left on the clock, I have to go out and kick a 40-yard field goal to win the Pro Bowl, right? So we go out there, and I'm working with a snapper and a holder that I've only worked with for a couple of days. And so I'm left-footed. Most of the guys that hold in the league, they're used to holding for a right-footed guy. And just as it happens, and it happened once or twice in practice, but I never really thought it would happen in the game. My holder, because he's so used to holding for a right-footed guy, would leave his hand out in front of the ball. And so he would block the kick. And sure enough, it was a 40-yard field goal off the left hash on our sidelines, lined up for the field goal, and he left his hand in front of the ball. So the ball traveled 39 yards, fell short. I mean, it was right down the middle. Fell short. And we go to overtime in the Pro Bowl. So I had to walk off the field, and all these guys are sitting there going, you're supposed to be one of the best kickers in the world, and you can't even kick the ball 39 yards? And I'm sitting on the bench, and a bad day just got really, really bad. Because they got the ball, they went down the field, and Kerry Blanchard kicked the field goal 5 minutes later to win the Pro Bowl. So now we're losers, okay? We had a chance to win the money, the whole deal. We lose the game. We go into the locker room. I grab my stuff as fast as I can, and I get out of there so I don't get myself in a bad place. And so we're coming out. I'm hot. I'm tired. It's been a long day, and I'm walking out, and when I walk around the corner, there are 10,000 people standing there looking for autographs because these are the best players in the NFL, and they're all the names that you know. And so they're all excited that they're on the island, they have a chance to get these autographs. And so I'm working my way through, heading out, and this guy comes running up with a program, and he sticks it in front of me and he says, Mr. Kasay, can I have your autograph? And in my wonderful Christian way, I said, no, I'm busy, I've got to go, you just got to let me. And I just kept walking. And I walked right by him. And my wife, who was walking behind me, she just kind of paused, and we just headed to the car. And as we got to the car, I felt bad. I was upset. I just didn't want to deal with it. I just wanted to leave. And so we get in the car, and she sticks her feet up on the dashboard, and she is locked in. And we're not leaving. And I look over at her, and she looks at me and she says, "You need to go back and sign that autograph." Now that's the last thing I wanted to hear. I was in the car, I already went through 10,000 people, I was able to get it. And that rhema hit me right between the ribs. And it hit me right in my heart. You're right. So I got up, got out of the car, and now I have to wade all the way back through these 10,000 people to try to find this guy. And it gets worse. Trust me. I found him, right? He's all the way up in the front. He's standing on that one edge there, and he's trying to sign. I walk up to him, and I said, "Look, I'm really sorry. I apologize. What can I sign for you?" And he goes, "Oh, Mr. Kasay, thank you. Thank you so much." He says, "I'm a new Christian. I'm a brand new Christian. And I wanted to come here today with this autograph because I wanted to go back home and tell my friends who's given me such a hard time for being a Christian that there are really good Christian guys that play in the NFL, and I wanted to get all their autographs, and I knew you were one of those guys." True story. True story. So I went from feeling that big to about that big. And I signed all of this stuff. And I apologized to him for my behavior. And I walked away. And I was ashamed. I still am. That was 23 years ago. And I'm still as ashamed today as I was then. But the reality is, being a doer of the word, what a difference it makes. Being a doer. I had the opportunity to recover. God's grace gave me the chance to still be a doer of the word, even when I was failing, and even when I failed miserably. Now, by God's grace, I have a wonderful wife, and she will dig her heels in, especially when I'm wrong. And that's way more than I ever want to admit. But the really cool thing about that experience is I go back to a famous passage that we all know so well. But I don't know if we ever make the connection. Because when you had that group that served, then you have that group that saw, and then you have that group that did not know God. The biggest difference was serving. Was being able to get out of that car and go and serve. Was to be able to come in here today and understanding how important your life is because you've served well for so long. But we have to pass that on. We can't just tell the stories. The stories are important. The story I just said, it moves. It moves me and it moves a lot of people a lot of times. But just telling the story is not enough. We've got to teach that next generation and show them how to serve, because if they never learn how to serve, they're never going to understand the beauty of that one-on-one, personal, intimate thing that God has for each one of our lives. Model the right life. Assist. Help that next generation. Give them the opportunity to lead. Give them the opportunity to fail. Assist, help, model, assist, watch them. Watch them from a distance. See them do it, and then leave. Leave. Let them stand. Let them ride. Let them do it. Those powerful truths in my life I've seen have played out over and over and over again. And playing in the NFL as long as I did, there's a whole group of guys at the Carolina Panthers, at the Seattle Seahawks, and at the New Orleans Saints that have carried on things that were taught to me, that I see happening, and I'm still in conversations with those guys, that they're still carrying on, and I've been out of the league for 7 years. And the really cool thing about that passage that I was referring to is Joshua chapter 24, verses 14 and 15. You'll identify it right away. The cool thing about this is Joshua made a decision. He made a decision that has forever impacted all of our lives. This is what he decided. As he said, "Now therefore, fear the Lord and serve him in sincerity and truth. And put away the gods which your fathers served beyond the river and in Egypt. And serve the Lord. If it is disagreeable in your sight to serve the Lord, choose you for yourselves today whom you will serve, whether the gods which your fathers served, which were beyond the river, or the gods of the Amorites, in whose lands you are living. But for me," and this is the one that everybody knows, right? "But for me and my house, we will serve the Lord." And if we serve the Lord, and we give that next generation the opportunity to serve, and we give that young generation an opportunity to serve, then they'll know God the way that you know God, and the way that I've seen God show up in my life. Let us pray. Father, I thank you for the loving reminder in your word to put into practice what you have commanded. Holy Spirit, help us to do justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with you. Help us to be a loving example to the next generation as we serve you well. And please, Lord, give us the desire in our hearts to serve you well. I pray this in the mighty name of Jesus. Amen. Thank you.